You are listening to Radio Aula Mundi.
Hi there, wherever you are. I'm Marco Rixecker, a freelance writer, reporter, producer, teacher, translator, tour guide, poet, singer, and songwriter. I speak several languages, and I'm the creator and founder of Radio Aula Mundi, an evolving podcast station where no language and all languages are spoken. It's a multilingual mix of music, poetry, lectures, languages, interviews, documentaries, recipes, and a lot more, co-produced with the students of the Aula Mundi International Cultural Center. You can find us on Linktree Radio Aula Mundi, podcast.apple.com, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Deezer, Instagram, LinkedIn, Blue Sky. Search for Radio Aula Mundi. The following narrative includes excerpts from 2 collections of testimonies and interviews. Let's Talk About It Anywhere in the World and The Universal Phrasebook of Indigenous Languages, UPIL, where it is all about the voices, accents, and speech patterns of indigenous people anywhere in the world, hand in hand with my own personal anecdotes and observations. In addition to that, everybody is free to introduce themselves and speak their minds openly, in their respective, often endangered languages and dialects, without any paraphrases or expectations. So let the story go on from there. Marcie D. Carter is an enrolled member of the Nez Perce Tribe in Idaho. She was born, raised, and lives in Lewiston, Idaho, which I had the opportunity to travel through on my journey along the Lewis and Clark Trail quite a few years before I hear Marcie Carter's voice in a podcast for the first time. She works for the Fisheries department of the Nez Perce Tribe, where her work focuses on watershed issues, especially the preservation and reintroduction of species like steelhead. Before that, Marcie Carter was involved in projects like the reintroduction of the Idaho wolf when she worked for the wildlife department of her tribe. As a trained biologist, she combines modern science with ancestral traditions and beliefs. She also knows about the old stories, which she has to reconcile with the Western world and its straightforward way of thinking. Her comments in the other podcast about wolf introduction and the deep connection Native Americans have with that animal are a key reason why I reach out and ask for an online interview from different places in the world. Eventually, we're able to connect in a chat room one Friday evening for an intense talk packed with information, stories, and emotions, until the time comes to wrap it all up with a traditional story from the Pacific Northwest and a touch of humor. So let's move on to the conversation with Marcie Carter, and the story goes on from there.
Hello, my name is Marcie Carter. I am an enrolled member of the Nez Perce Tribe. I currently reside in Lewiston, Idaho, which is off of the 1863 reservation boundary, but I do live within the 1855 area of our treaty. I have 2 children who are also enrolled, a son and a daughter, and I am currently the deputy director for the Watershed Division for the Nez Perce Tribe Fisheries department. So I work in fisheries now. Our goal is to restore habitat for endangered steelhead and other native salmonids here in the Snake Basin, the Snake River Basin. I've been in fisheries for, since 2011, half my career, I guess, and then the other half I was in the wildlife department where I worked on, a variety of wildlife species. Also, that's where I got my start on the Idaho wolf project. But I also, worked on bighorn sheep and elk, forest songbirds, and then I was able to go to graduate school and worked on northern goshawks for that. Since then, I also went back to get a PhD, which is it's more of a education and outreach. It's in natural resources, but it's in education and outreach where we worked with Nez Perce tribal high school students, indigenous knowledge, remote sensing, that type of activity. So I think that's pretty much it.
Early on, I focused on the Nez Perce language as a topic and how we can associate it with the culture, Marcie Carter's personal background and story, but also with what her work as a researcher focuses on, water and wildlife. How fluent an indigenous language speaker are you?
Not very. I actually took 2 years of Nez Perce language when I was an undergraduate at Lewis Clark State College. And interestingly, and that counted as foreign language, thankfully. So the Nez Perce foreign language class, I was in class and the instructors walked in on the first day, and one of them was my grandfather, Cecil Carter. And I, waved to him, and he waved back. And I see my grandpa all the time, my grandparents, I would see them all the time. And afterwards, I was like, oh no, before I went up to him and I said, "Hey, Gramps," I go, "What are you doing here?" And he said, I'm the teacher." And I was like floored because he never taught us Nimi Putempt. He never taught us language. He never taught his children, my dad. But, I think that was just part of, the, the concept of, how do you say it? Just being a member of the white society, and yeah, he never taught it, and he was fluent. He actually spoke and understood the old Nez Perce language, and yeah, he spoke it fluently. I had no idea till I was in college.
What do you call yourselves?
We call ourselves Nimipu, Nimipu, the people.
What's your favorite Nimipu word or expression these days?
Um, well, I say this to my kids, and actually, so my daughter goes to Lewiston High School, which is in basically all white school, but I was the chairman of our Indian Ed committee, and so I was able to get Nez Perce language incorporated into the curriculum here at Lewiston. So now it's been there. This will be the third year, I think. But yeah, so now our high school kids, and it's open to not to native and non-native and all native students, whoever wants to learn it. But um, so she knows some language. But one of my favorite words is just humptits, and that means just hurry up, humptits. And my grandparents used to say that to me too. Um, those sayings that my grandparents and my great grandparents would say. It's interesting because as Nimipu people, as Nimipu, all of our people were impacted by, of course, colonialism, residential schools, religion, and so we've all kind of fractured on the things that I guess we do as people still, traditional activities. So, some people, know their language very well, and a lot of us don't. Some people, you know, go fishing, we go and we practice our traditions of fishing, and then some of us didn't. And then some of us, are really good at, digging roots and cooking them traditionally, and then some families aren't. So it's interesting in that that's kind of that the layers of culture that we are dealing with now. And it's not our fault because, of course, that happened to our grandparents, our great grandparents. They were forced to, burn regalia or, get rid of it or stop speaking their language. And, you know what I'm talking about. But so yeah, my dad, even though my grandpa spoke fluently, and I asked my dad that, I said, "Did you know that grandpa was fluent?" And he even said no. He said he would talk to them in little, and it was mainly when he was mad at them. Yeah, when my grandpa was mad, he would say something. So they knew all of those types of phrases. But, growing up, my dad would, at the dinner table would, tell us what the bread was called and what the salt and pepper was or what the soup was or, and so he was trying to at least teach us that little tiny bit that he knew, which, I didn't realize then what I know now as far as, how valuable that was.
What's the Nez Perce word for wolf?
Himine. And it comes from him, your mouth. That's the word. Him is the word for mouth. And so our people named him Himine because he talked with his mouth, you know, with his howling and his barking and, how he would interact with his family, um, yelling or what have you. But yeah, it was because he talked.
Who's your trickster?
The coyote. Coyote is trickster. Himine has a higher, I don't know, like a higher, he's higher up in the tier of animals, I think. Um, and I don't know if we actually had, those kinds of like tiers of respect, I guess. But yeah, the coyote was definitely trickster, and he was the center of our stories and, and lessons. So, but he was different. Coyote's different. He doesn't have that family group like a wolf pack does. He's more of a loner, and wolves are, their families, their groups, and larger and extended families. So
What word would you have either for the Snake River or just for river or water or like watershed or something?
well, we call water kus, kuus. River, oh man, you're asking me some words that I know them. And we have a word for the snake, of course. I can't think of it right now. But yes, all of those basins, those rivers, of course, have their own name, that are probably descriptive or, where something happened there is why they're named that. And it's probably an old word that, has been around for generations and, passed down. And maybe we don't even know what the translation is anymore. That's kind of how old those words are.
My next question will have an impact on the rest of our conversation. It will even lead to a change of the way Marcie Carter thinks about storytelling. Where do you draw the line between science and spirituality?
I don't think I have a line. I think that's a great question. I think, if I was in that, I think I just kind of, the situation I'm in, whether it's, talking to you or talking to, our tribal people or, giving a presentation, I think maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I would have made that separation, but now I don't think I do. I don't separate it even then because I don't I don't want to assimilate, again. And yeah, I think it's still like this.
How much of a storyteller are you?
I'm not. I wish I was. I wish I could remember stories and tell them, but I'm horrible. There are some tribal members that can just go, one after another about stories, about what happened, about what Coyote did, and, who Coyote interacted with. And I'm horrible. I don't remember that stuff.
Marcie Carter's change of mind really happens when she thinks about one of two recurrent questions I frequently ask in interviews associated with people's motivations and their effects on others. Why bother? Two questions, five senses. Reflections on our arts and crafts. Why bother?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I could tell a story and give some support as to why it's important. Why these watersheds are important, ecologically and, traditionally. You're right. Well, it was so the Snake was a watershed that, so the Nez Perce had several bands of people, and our bands of people lived in these villages, and so they had their names of their villages based on that location, which meant something, of course, to them, to the rest of the people. And so we had people all the way down the Snake, or all the way up the Snake down into the Boise Valley, even over into central Idaho, into the Salmon River, the Middle Fork, the Upper Salmon, Bear Valley, all the way down to the Sawtooths, and so, and that's based on like our language, of course, the names of these places. So yeah, we had a name for that place, which means that we were there and we, inhabited and used those places for whatever. So, so yeah, and so we claim that still, and you know, because, and I'm going to speak, kind of contemporarily, because those places are in jeopardy for loss of whatever it is, in my work right now, it's salmon and steelhead. So that is what we are working on in this basin, is trying to restore habitat, trying to fix those problems that, you know, um, white people made, mining and logging and roads and all these anthropogenic problems. We're trying to fix those so that, salmon and steelhead could come back and hopefully spawn in those areas. So yeah, we contemporarily, they're important for that reason. Traditionally, they're important because our people live there. That was their village sites. There's, cultural resources that are there that, need to be protected. Um, so yeah, I can, that would include all of the watersheds in the basin here, the Clearwater, um, the Lochsa, all of these rivers that, should have millions and millions of fish coming back and don't.
What senses does your work appeal to the most?
I don't know. I think that depends on the day. Um, it's I'm a super good Western scientist, so I can roll with that. And but then I can step back, and be the tribal member and, speak on behalf of, what it is that we are trying to do, protecting those resources that were guaranteed to us in our treaty with the U.S. government. So, again, I don't know if I really kind of separate them, but sometimes I find myself thinking, one way, and I'm like, okay, I need to be thinking about being a tribal member now because, and this happened to me yesterday because I was in a meeting and we were talking about fish, of course, but there was other tribal members in the room that, are all about tribal member harvest of fish. And our fish are, critically endangered, the wild fish are. But we have hatchery fish that our tribal members can fish on. But sometimes you catch wild fish, and the wild fish kind of limit what we can do as tribal members in harvesting and taking of our fish, because we're guaranteed 50% of the fish that come back. So 50% of the steelhead, 50% of the coho, 50% of fall chinook, et cetera, et cetera. And so these tribal member males were just like, they were like, we need to just fish those steelhead, wild or not. And I was in my brain thinking, no, we need to conserve those genetics. Otherwise they're going to disappear. In their thoughts, this tribal member male was like, it don't matter. They're going to go away anyways. We should just fish them. But so I was just sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, I should be thinking like they are, but I'm not. And so in those situations, it's difficult for me because, I'm about conservation too. It's like, no, we need these fish. We need those wild fish in the river, even if there's only, 2,000. We need them. We need to keep holding on, because maybe someday we're going to get those dams breached and, they will recover or at least begin to recover. But so in those kinds of situations, I couldn't reconcile that. And I was standing firm on my Western science side with the hat on. I mean, I didn't say that to those guys because it would have probably blew up into a big old argument, but I couldn't agree with them. I was like, nope, we can't fish the last wild steelhead out of that river. We can't. We can't be, I mean, I know that's not our fault. We're not the reason that those fish are, imperiled, but it's like we still can't contribute to their, to their extinction.
As soon as we connected, I noticed a picture hanging on the wall behind Marcie Carter in her living room. It shows Chief Joseph, the famous Nez Perce leader. And so I shift our conversation to all kinds of personalities. First, I ask Marcie Carter a question about Chief Joseph before we move on to someone else's story that will get her outright emotional, and yet, at the same time, she's going to tell a little story that includes some typical native humor. If Chief Joseph came back to your traditional homeland now, what would he say?
He wouldn't recognize it. It has been, of course, logged and roaded and, homes built in floodplains and then, next to areas, sacred areas, his, where he was, where his village was over in the Wallowa, that is just, it's, the river's diverted. There's, yeah, I was just over there 2 weeks ago and it's such a beautiful place. And, I, totally understand why his band of people did not want to leave. And yeah, he would not recognize it. And I'm sure he would have some choice Nimi Poo Timpt words. if we had some good ones, in the language for that. But yeah, he would be very sad.
Who's the personality you'd like to chat with now or have dinner with later today?
Probably my grandfather. You know, um, he passed away in 11, and I spent a lot of time with him, but I never really asked him those questions, that I have now. Yeah. I asked him one time because he was really quiet. We would sit there in silence for, you know, 20 minutes, and then he would say something. But I took him to a restaurant, and I asked him, I said, so, I go, where did our people come from, Gramps? Where was your mother, and where was Grandma Mary, and where was Grandpa Caleb from? And he said that his mother was from the Whitebird area, from up on the prairie, and he had a word for it too. And then his father was from the Wallowa band, because his grandfather was John Carter Sewastoct, and he was in Joseph's band. And I said, well, okay, what about Grandma? And he's eating all quiet, and he looks at me and he said she was a Christian. I said, she is a Christian. I said, well, I know that, Gramps. I said, but her people came from bands, and he just said she was a Christian. And that was it. And he didn't want to talk about it any further. So I didn't find out where my grandma, her people came from, Kamiai or Kuski, you know. So, it's that kind of stuff. I would have liked to have bugged him a little bit further on.
What is Nez Perce humor like?
It's well, it's a lot of, I mean, of course, teasing, but yeah, it's kind of there's a lot of teasing and a lot of, I mean, it's in all the good fun, of course, but it's sometimes it's dry wit, dry humor, you know, and I think that's kind of course, evolved with, what the humor was back, what my grandpa thought was funny, and what people think are funny now, of course. But yeah, there's a lot of humor. I mean, you almost have to have it just to kind of course, keep your sanity in this day and age. Yeah.
Eventually, I share a story that I was given in the Pacific Northwest with Marcie Carter. She can definitely relate to it and will also end up understanding the humorous twist behind it, making a comment that ends with an open question. And the story goes on from there. In the beginning, the mountains thought they were people. So, Marcie, how does the story go on from there?
Well, I mean, that is kind of our creation story, is that the animals and the things on the landscape, were the people. And so they decided how you know, how order was, put forth, how the rivers ran, where the trees grew, where the rocks were. And then, the animals also, had voices and made decisions, and that all changed, of course, when people came, when the native people came and they traded places. So, and there are coyote stories that kind of, tell those stories about certain places here on the landscape, about these boulders, why those boulders are there, what they used to be. So yeah, it's, you know, they're stories, but they're passed down. And I always, view things as, if it was passed down that many generations, then to me, as a native person, I believe it. Okay, you know? I mean, it's like even, stories about, Bigfoot. It's like, okay, I believe that because, why would our people, 1,000 years ago talk about that if, there wasn't some truth behind it? So I I think I still believe that. I think that, yeah, those things have voices and they're speaking.
In the beginning, the mountains thought they were people. In the beginning, the trees thought they were people. In the beginning, the rivers thought they were people. And in the beginning, the animals thought they were people. Someday they will say, in the beginning, human beings thought they were people. So now, how do you like them apples?
Yeah, it's true. And I wonder when that will be, when we say that, or when that saying, comes about, people thought they were people. Is it going to be when it's the mountains are speaking again, or they're the ones that have the voice? Who knows?